Hey, Nerd Squad! Today we're going to talk about one of the more esoteric groups from Batman's Rogues Gallery, the Order of Saint Dumas. Like most folks, my introduction to the Order of Saint Dumas came during the 90s. It's very hard to avoid them, though. They've only been featured in 13 stories across 2 decades, so they must be important. Right? Right. That's why it's so weird that even if you go back to their first appearance, there's already a bunch of history that's taken place prior to that moment. But let's try anyway. We are going to begin our investigation into the historical record of the Order of Saint Dumas in Detective Comics number 583. This story arc is called Sword of Azrael. It takes place in the past, present, and future. And the most interesting part of it is that the version of Azrael who's inhabiting the future actually isn't an Azrael at all. No, sirree, Bob. This cat's name is Stephen Forrest Lee. He is a devout Christian, a highly skilled fighter, and he's half Chinese and half Caucasian. There's nothing too extraordinary about him, except that his entire life has been devoted to the service of the Order of Saint Dumas. And we get our first taste of what that means. For those unfamiliar, the Order of Saint Dumas is a subdivision of the Knights Templar. For those unfamiliar, the Knights Templar were a Catholic military order founded in 1118 for the purpose of protecting pilgrims on their way to the Holy Land. They got really popular during the Crusades, and the reason for that is because these guys were super hardcore. They took vows of chastity and poverty. They prayed 5 times a day, but they also engaged in combat up to 6 hours a day. And their mission expanded to include eliminating heretical Christians and Muslims. Let's just say they didn't stick to defending pilgrims. And that ethos of strict religious discipline is a big part of the Order of Saint Dumas, although it seems like they don't agree with how the Templars went about doing things. In fact, the story goes that a long time ago, the Order of Saint Dumas had a falling out with the Templars, and then King Philip the Fair came and suppressed the Templars, forcing many of them into hiding. And now they're a secret society dedicated to the idea of a warrior monk, someone who can resist the temptations of the flesh. They don't accept everyone who walks through their doors. And Stephen Forrest Lee joined the order because he passed their tests. He could do things like recite scriptures backwards and forwards. He could fight like the devil himself, but he also agreed with their mission statement. They have a bit of a problem, though. They're still looking for their champion, their Dumas. See, the whole idea of the Order of Saint Dumas is to be holy warriors, but they need someone to lead them, someone who is perhaps a little too holy. So they spend centuries searching for the perfect candidate. And when they finally find him, they send him away to train. Now, this is kind of a dick move. You find your guy, you tell him he's special, you tell him he's different, you tell him he's basically the Messiah, and then you send him away to train for a life of violence. But it's all for a good cause, right? The Order of Saint Dumas believes that they are destined to fight in the apocalypse, and their job is to make sure that their champion is ready for that duty when the time comes. Stephen Forrest Lee takes the name Dumas and spends years honing his body and mind, learning everything he can about theology, philosophy, martial arts, everything necessary to become the perfect soldier of God. The Order thinks he's ready. And when they send him out on his first mission, things go wrong. He faces off against Manhunter and loses. Okay, maybe they weren't ready after all. But the story doesn't end there. Dumas isn't defeated. He's simply outmatched. His potential is clear. And when the leader of the Order of Saint Dumas encounters Manhunter, he sees something similar. Manhunter's ability to manipulate light is compared to the radiance of a god, and he's seen as a sign from God that the Order's work is almost complete. You see, the Order of Saint Dumas isn't just trying to find a champion, they're trying to find a catalyst, someone who will push them towards their ultimate goal. And when they find that catalyst, they are willing to sacrifice anyone to bring it about. So they turn their attention to Manhunter. They decide that he is their Dumas, and they try to force him to join them. But he resists, and in the struggle, Dumas is forced to kill Manhunter. And that sacrifice brings about the revolution the Order of Saint Dumas has been waiting for. I said Dumas wasn't defeated. He lived to carry out his master's will. It's a cool origin story, but unfortunately it's not true. We don't actually know anything about the origin of the Order of St. Dumas. What we do know is that they are a continuation of the Templars, but they've grown substantially since their last appearance in Detective Comics number 583. In fact, they've grown so much that they've splintered into 3 different factions, each with their own unique goals and outlook on the world. But they are all united by their dedication to the idea of the Dumas. Let's go back to the future and meet Jean-Paul Valley, Azrael II. He may not be the Dumas, but he is the chosen champion of the Order of St. Dumas, and he shares a lot of similarities with Stephen Forrest Lee. He's handsome, he's charming, he's charismatic, but he's also incredibly disciplined and well-trained, and he follows the tenets of his faith closely. When he was young, his father was killed by the Order of St. Dumas, and he was raised to avenge his death. When he finds them, he becomes their champion. But that's not where the story ends. As the Dumas, he eventually leaves the Order and comes into conflict with Batman. And as I mentioned earlier, he defeats Batman and replaces him for a time. But he also leads the Order of St. Dumas to victory against their enemies, and they grow in power and numbers. Eventually, he returns to the fold and fights alongside Batman against an enemy called Dagon. And in the process, he reconnects with his heritage. He rediscovers who he is and what he's capable of. He uses the Mother Box and the system that's embedded within him to defeat Dagon, but the Order of St. Dumas is unaware of any of this. From their point of view, he simply defeated Dagon and then vanished. But what they don't know is that Jean-Paul has once again left the fold. He's tired of being a pawn in the game of gods, and he wants to carve out his own path. And that's where we meet the 3rd iteration of the Dumas, Michael Lane. He's a mysterious figure who is brought to the attention of the Order of St. Dumas by one of their agents, and he is the natural successor to Jean-Paul. Unfortunately, Michael is still getting his bearings. He's fresh meat, and he hasn't proven himself yet, so he has to earn his stripes. But the Order of St. Dumas is patient. They have been around for centuries, and they have no problem waiting a few more months to make sure their new Dumas is up to snuff. But that's only the case because their leader, Brother Rollo, has a few tricks up his sleeve. You see, the Order of St. Dumas isn't just a fighting force. They are a massive international organization with tentacles in every facet of human society. And they have been planning for years. They've been stockpiling knowledge and power, and they are ready to strike. First, they send out their agent, Sister Lilhy, to retrieve the lost Mother Box that was taken by Jean-Paul. And then they set their sights on the Vatican. They plan to kidnap the Pope and hold him hostage until the Dumas returns the box. But the plan doesn't go as smoothly as they hoped. While Michael Lane was able to defeat Jean-Paul, he has yet to prove himself to the Order, and they have been forced to call in Sister Lily to assist. But Lily has other plans. She is growing tired of serving the Order of St. Dumas, and she wants to chart her own course. She helps Michael, but she also betrays the Order and sets the Vatican's security systems to stun rather than kill. When the dust settles, the Pope is unharmed, and Michael Lane has proven himself worthy of the Dumas. But as soon as he is accepted, the Order of St. Dumas crumbles around him. Lily has been exposed, and the entire organization is on the verge of collapse, and that's where our story begins. Michael Lane finds himself face to face with the remnants of the Order of St. Dumas, and he must choose his next move carefully. If he wants to honor the legacy of the Dumas, he must do what is right. But what is right? Is he loyal to the Order of St. Dumas, or is he loyal to Lilhy? Is he loyal to Jean-Paul, or is he loyal to himself? Well, I guess that's for us to find out in the next installment. In the meantime, though, I think it's safe to say that the Order of St. Dumas is a powerful force that should not be underestimated. They have been around for centuries, and they have shown no signs of slowing down. In fact, they seem to be growing stronger with each passing day, and that's why it's so important to understand their history and their motivations. But I think we're done talking about their history for now. So let's move on to the motivations. Why does the Order of St. Dumas do what they do? What are their goals? And what do they hope to achieve? Well, the answer to that question is simple. The Order of St. Dumas exists to serve the divine. They believe that they are instruments of God's will, and they are dedicated to carrying out His work. They believe that they are holy warriors, and they are committed to upholding the values of their faith. They also believe that they are destined to fight in the apocalypse, and they are preparing themselves for that eventuality. And they believe that the Dumas is the key to unlocking their ultimate potential. They believe that the Dumas is the catalyst that will allow them to fulfill their destiny. Well, friends, that's all I've got for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the flip side.